All right, now I would love to introduce our speaker for today, Pastor Alison. Let's give her a warm welcome.
Thank you, Nara. It's so good to have you back. Just want to give a quick plug for the retreat. The retreat is so great. Take the flyer home that is on your seat, look at it, reach out if you have any questions. We would love to have as many of you as possible here attend with us. So if there's any questions you have, or if you would like to get more information about scholarships, please reach out. We'd love to help you. So as Nara mentioned, my name is Alison. I'm the lead pastor here at the River. It's so good to be here with all of you, those of you who are physically here with us in the room today. Also, a special welcome to those of you who are tuning in via live stream. So we're currently in a sermon series called Practicing the Way of Love. And during this series, we've been exploring the question, how might Christian practices, broadly defined, help us to more fully experience and embody unconditional agape love? And today, we're going to explore the topic of worship. So when we think about worship in a Christian context, the first thing that comes to mind for many of us is a church service like this one today. And in particular, we often think about the portions of the service where we express ourselves to God by singing together. Music is, of course, one beautiful way of connecting with and worshiping God, which is why we set aside time to do it together every Sunday. But it's also important for us to consider the ways that worship as a category is broader than just musical expression. Those of you who have been part of the River for a long time will remember our year of no singing. Due to noise complaints from tenants in the building that we were subleasing at the time, for an entire year, we actually were not allowed to sing during our Sunday services. And we were forced to lean into other ways of worshiping God together. When we finally moved locations, it was especially joyful to be able to sing together again. And while that was a season that I'm confident that none of us who were here at the time would want to go through again, I also believe that some of the lessons that we learned during that season about the expansive nature of worship are worth holding on to. According to Merriam-Webster, to worship means to honor or show reverence for the subject of worship, to regard with great or extravagant respect, admiration, or devotion. Whenever we direct our honor, reverence, respect, admiration, or devotion in significant ways, we are engaging in worship. And wherever we are directing this kind of energy and attention is the subject of our worship. Someone whose perspective on worship has really stuck with me over the years is writer David Foster Wallace. Now, I want to be clear that by quoting Wallace here, I am not endorsing everything about him and his life. Many consider Wallace to be a literary genius, but he was also, by many accounts, someone who was egotistical, misogynistic, abusive, and who struggled throughout his life to navigate addiction and depression. All that being said, Wallace had some profound insights about modern life that are worth wrestling with. In a 2005 commencement speech to the graduating class at Kenyon College, Wallace said this: "Here's something else that's true. In the day-to-day trenches of adult life, there is actually no such thing as atheism. There is no such thing as not worshiping. Everybody worships. The only choice we get is what to worship. And the compelling reason for maybe choosing some sort of God or spiritual type thing to worship, be it JC or Allah or Yahweh or the wicked mother goddess or the Four Noble Truths or some infrangible set of ethical principles is that pretty much anything else you worship will eat you alive. If you worship money and things, if they are where you tap real meaning in life, then you will never have enough. Never feel you have enough. It's the truth. Worship your body and beauty and sexual allure, and you will always feel ugly. And when time and age start showing, you will die a million deaths before they finally plant you. On one level, we all know this stuff already. It's been codified as myths, proverbs, cliches, bromides, epigrams, parables, the skeleton of every great story. The trick is keeping the truth up front in daily consciousness. Worship power, you will end up feeling weak and afraid, and you will need ever more power over others to keep the fear at bay. Worship your intellect, being seen as smart, you will end up feeling stupid, a fraud, always on the verge of being found out, and so on. Look, the insidious thing about these forms of worship is not that they're evil or sinful, it is that they are unconscious. They are default settings. They're the kind of worship you just gradually slip into day after day, getting more and more selective about what you see and how you measure value without ever being fully aware that that's what you're doing. And the world will not discourage you from operating on your default settings because the world of men and money and power hums along quite nicely on the fuel of fear and contempt and frustration and craving and the worship of self. Our own present culture has harnessed these forces in ways that have yielded extraordinary wealth and comfort and personal freedom. The freedom all to be lords of our tiny school-sized kingdoms alone at the center of all creation. This kind of freedom has much to recommend it. But of course, there are all different kinds of freedom. And the kind that is most precious, you will not hear much talked about in the great outside world of winning and achieving and displaying. The really important kind of freedom involves attention and awareness and discipline and effort and being able to truly care about other people and to sacrifice for them over and over in myriad, petty, little, unsexy ways every day. That is real freedom. The alternative is unconsciousness, the default setting, the rat race, the constant gnawing sense of having had and lost some infinite thing. It seems to me that there's truth in what Wallace said here. Everybody worships something. The question is whether we do so consciously or unconsciously, whether or not we mindfully choose what and how we worship. So to help us think a bit more about choosing what and how to worship, I wanted to take a look at some passages from the book of Exodus. Exodus is the second book in the Bible, and it's named for the major event that took place in the first half of the book, Israel's exodus from Egypt. With Moses as leader of the people, God led the Israelites out of slavery and oppression in Egypt. And once freed, the Israelites needed to figure out what would come next for them. While they camped in the wilderness near Mount Sinai, Moses went up and down the mountain, communicating with God on behalf of the people. And through one of these trips, God established a special covenant with the people. The Israelites would be for God a priestly kingdom and a holy nation as long as they would obey God's commands. The people agreed to this arrangement. They said, "Everything the Lord has spoken, we will do." God spoke the 10 commandments to the Israelites, appearing to them in the midst of thick darkness. And the first 2 commandments were, "You shall have no other gods before me, and you shall not make yourself an idol." The Israelites were meant to remember the ways that God had been faithful to them by bringing them out of Egypt. And out of that remembrance, they were to worship and serve their God alone, not any other gods or any idols of their own making. So after God finished sharing the 10 commandments with the Israelites, something interesting happened. The passage says, "When all the people witnessed the thunder and lightning, the sound of the trumpet, and the mountain smoking, they were afraid and trembled and stood at a distance and said to Moses, 'You speak to us, and we will listen, but do not let God speak to us, lest we die.' Then the people stood at a distance while Moses drew near to the thick darkness where God was." There was this really interesting moment here when the presence of God seemed too big, too mysterious, too powerful for the Israelites to engage with directly. In this moment, it felt safer for them to engage with God from a distance, to have Moses act as an intermediary between God and the people. And I wonder, have you ever felt that way? That it would be safer to engage with God from a distance or through trusted intermediaries, or like God was hidden in a thick darkness that only others could find their way through? I know that I have at times. After this, Moses reassured the Israelites that they should not be afraid of God, that God only wanted what was best for them. But he also agreed to honor their wishes for him to be the intermediary. So Moses continued to go up and down the mountain, receiving laws from God and sharing them with the people. And during one of Moses' trips up the mountain, the people didn't seem to know if or when Moses was going to come back. Exodus 32:1 says, "When the people saw that Moses delayed to come down from the mountain, the people gathered around Aaron and said to him, 'Come, make gods for us who shall go before us. As for this Moses, the man who brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we do not know what has become of him.'" So Aaron, he agreed to help the people. He took their jewelry and he used it to make them a golden calf, and the people worshiped it. So clearly, Moses' absence had a big impact on the people. It affected them so greatly that they were willing to break this special covenant that they had just made with God. God had told the Israelites, "You have seen for yourselves that I have spoken to you from heaven. Do not make any gods to be alongside me. Do not make for yourself gods of silver or gods of gold." And yet here they were, making a god of gold. And why would the people do this? What were they experiencing that made them think that breaking the covenant was the best way forward? The passage doesn't really tell us explicitly, but I wonder what kind of intense emotions the people were feeling. Maybe the people felt like Moses had abandoned them or let them down, or like God didn't care about them anymore. Maybe they felt incredibly vulnerable, anxious, and afraid. After the trauma they'd experienced in Egypt and the current uncertainty of their life in the wilderness, those feelings would have been completely reasonable. And perhaps those intense, uncomfortable feelings were so strong that in order to feel some immediate relief, the Israelites were willing to risk their long-term best interests and also to compromise the commitments that they had made. But had Moses really abandoned the Israelites? Had God actually lost interest in them? According to the text, no. At the same time as this whole scene below the mountain was playing out, Moses was up on Mount Sinai talking to God, advocating on behalf of the Israelites. In fact, God was paying such close attention to the people that God was able to quote their exact words to Moses. But the people didn't know that. And the feelings they were experiencing were so intense, so all-consuming that they felt like the entire truth. They felt like they'd been abandoned, so it must mean that they had, in fact, been abandoned. They were convinced that Moses and God were not going to return, so they believed they needed to create a new God to fill the void. They interpreted their feelings as evidence of their reality, and they projected that reality into the future. It would be easy to judge the Israelites, but we all do this at times, don't we? Worshiping God is hard, especially during seasons of uncertainty and hardship. But even during seasons of peace and abundance, it can be hard to filter through all of the noise, to remain connected to God in the midst of the countless forces vying for our attention and allegiance. It's often easier to worship what is right in front of us, to grab onto what is tangible and easily within reach, to create and to worship our own gods of silver or gods of gold. As we explored earlier, everybody worships something. The question is whether we do so consciously or unconsciously, whether or not we mindfully choose what and how we worship. As followers of Jesus, we are invited to worship the God of unconditional agape love. But the God of love is not controlling. God will not force us into this kind of worship. God uses the power of love, or amipotence, to invite us and lure us and woo us, but never to control us. Theologian Thomas J. Ord puts it this way: amipotence describes God's uncontrolling love for all creatures and all creation. It's an ambipotent God's nature to love everyone and everything without forcing anyone or anything. An ambipotent spirit will be neither overriding or absent, neither inactive nor the sole cause of everything, neither utter mystery nor an impersonal force. Like a good mother who neither manipulates nor neglects her children, God can be seen like a universal mother always influencing for good. The idea that God can't control better fits our experience of making free choices among limited options. We aren't controlled, we really choose. It fits the agency, spontaneity, randomness, and indeterminacy of the universe. We think existence isn't entirely determined by the Creator nor by creation. Rather, moment by moment, creation is made free, and creatures can work in tandem with God. So Ord reminds us we aren't controlled, we really choose. And this is true when it comes to worship. Worshiping the God of love is something we can choose or not choose. The choice is ours. And if we choose to worship the God of unconditional love and not to worship gods of silver and gold, things like money, possessions, beauty, power, intellect, even belonging in inner circles, as Maddie spoke about last week, and so on, if we choose that, then we need to be mindful about how we are directing our attention and resources, about who or what we are serving, prioritizing, and admiring, about the ends that we are longing, striving, and sacrificing for. We need to regularly ask ourselves questions like, what do I want my life to be about, and how can I take a next step in that direction? So what then does it look like to intentionally choose to worship the God of love? You may have been in contexts where the answer to this question was to spend more time engaging in religious practices. You may have been encouraged to spend more time praying, reading the Bible, attending church, and so on. All of these are good things that can help us to worship God mindfully. Let's do them together. But let's also remember that doing these things doesn't automatically move us closer to the heart of God. Take, for example, Confederate General Robert E. Lee. He was known to frequently engage in Christian worship practices. Gregory Elder wrote this about Lee. There is no question that Lee was a devout Christian, prayed daily, and attended religious services whenever he could. He read from the Bible daily, and there are countless reports of his troops seeing or coming across Lee kneeling in prayer, particularly before battles. Lee was supposedly a devout Christian. He regularly prayed, read the Bible, and attended church services, and yet he completely missed the heart of God. Instead of working with God to protect the dignity and worth of all people, or to help all people live lives of abundance and flourishing, Lee chose to become an agent of dehumanization and destruction by fighting to defend the vile institution of American slavery, the effects of which we are still grappling with in our country today. And unfortunately, Lee is not an anomaly. I am sure that we can all think of so-called devout Christians or devout followers of other traditions who engage in many religious practices but do not embody unconditional love in their lives or in the world. It seems that this has been a problem throughout human history, and there are countless examples of this in the Bible. The prophet Isaiah shared this message with the people of Israel. You serve your own interest on your fast day and oppress all your workers. You fast only to quarrel and to fight and to strike with a wicked fist. Such fasting as you do today will not make your voice heard on high. Is such the fast that I choose, a day to humble oneself? Is it to bow down the head like a bulrush and to lie in sackcloth and ashes? Will you call this a fast, a day acceptable to the Lord? Is not this the fast that I choose? To loose the bonds of injustice, to undo the straps of the yoke, to let the oppressed go free, and to break every yoke? Is it not to share your bread with the hungry and bring the homeless poor into your house? When you see the naked, to cover them and not to hide yourself from your own kin? Then your light shall break forth like the dawn, and your healing shall spring up quickly. The prophet Amos shared a similar message. Amos said, I despise your festivals, and I take no delight in your solemn assemblies. Even though you offer me your burnt offerings and grain offerings, I will not accept them. And the offerings of well-being of your fattened animals, I will not look upon. Take away from me the noise of your songs. I will not listen to the melody of your harps, but let justice roll down like water and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. And Jesus, too, he shared a similar message with religious leaders of his day. He said, "Woe to you, hypocrites, for you lock people out of the kingdom of heaven. For you do not go in yourselves, and when others are going in, you stop them. Woe to you, hypocrites, for you cross sea and land to make a single convert, and you make the new convert twice as much a child of Gehenna as yourselves. Woe to you, hypocrites, for you tithe mint, dill, and cumin and have neglected the weightier matters of the law, justice and mercy and faith. It is these you ought to have practiced without neglecting the others. You blind guides, you strain out a gnat but swallow a camel. Woe to you, hypocrites, for you clean the outside of the cup and of the plate, but inside they are full of greed and self-indulgence. First, clean the inside of the cup and of the plate so that the outside also may become clean. Woe to you, hypocrites, for you are like whitewashed tombs, which on the outside look beautiful, but inside are full of the bones of the dead and of all kinds of uncleanness. So you also on the outside look righteous to others, but inside you are full of hypocrisy and lawlessness. From Isaiah to Amos to Jesus, God's message is the same. Worship is meant to be paired with the weightier matters of faith, things like justice, mercy, righteousness, and so on. Without a commitment to these things, our worship is absolutely meaningless. No matter how many spiritual practices we engage in, we cannot claim to be devoted to God, to worship God, if we do not seek to embody love and justice in the world. And I say love and justice because, as Dr. Cornel West reminds us, justice is what love looks like in public. Just like tenderness is what love feels like in private. Love and justice go hand in hand. So we've explored how worshiping the God of love is something we can choose or not choose, and how worship is meant to be paired with the weightier matters of faith, things like justice, mercy, righteousness, and so on. One final thought that I want to offer is the idea that worship is about God's presence and our response to it. This framing of worship as God's presence and our response to it comes from poet and essayist Kathleen Norris. Personally, I find this framing to be really helpful. The truth is that God is absolutely everywhere. There is nowhere that we can go apart from God. At the same time, there are moments when we are more or less aware of God's presence and are more or less aligned with God's heart. We worship God whenever we intentionally orient ourselves toward God, toward things like life, love, beauty, goodness, and truth. Whenever we choose to turn away from the idols and masks that lead us toward death, disconnection, despair, and destruction. Whenever we give God permission to wrestle with us, to form us, to work within us and through us. Whenever we allow ourselves to be moved by the Spirit with us, within us, and within others, and to authentically respond to God's presence, guidance, character, attributes, and concerns. Whenever we do any of those things, we are worshiping the God of unconditional love. And we can worship on our own or in the presence of others wherever we find God's presence, which is to say, literally anywhere. As I mentioned earlier, worship is so much broader than musical expression. However, as we are about to move into a time of responding through musical worship, I do want to offer a few invitations for how you may want to use this time together. So I'd encourage you, to the best of your ability, to use the time that we spend in musical worship in ways that are life-giving for you personally. Consider the songs that the team plays and sings as a sort of container, a space purposely created to give you room to turn toward God should you choose to do so. Worship is not meant to be about performing piety. It is meant to be about responding genuinely to our experience of God's presence with us, or even to respond to our experience of not perceiving God's presence with us. Whatever our experience is, we're meant to respond genuinely. Sometimes a genuine response to God's presence is gratitude, celebration, awe, or wonder. But other times it's things like sadness, confusion, frustration, anger. Whatever your response may be, try to give yourself permission to receive, to wrestle, to respond, and just to rest. To trust that your soul knows what you need in this very moment. If it feels helpful to you, I'd encourage you to try to notice the ways that during musical worship, we sing in 3 different directions. We sing to ourselves, we sing to one another here, and we also sing to God. Consider the lyrics themselves, the way it feels to say them or to not say them, the way it feels to hear them or to receive them in your body. Maybe consider questions like, where am I experiencing resonance? Where am I experiencing resistance? What truths about God or people or the world feel especially important for you or for us to remember today? And if you'd like, feel free to use this time to pray silently on your own or with a member of our prayer team. Talk to God about whatever may be on your heart or your mind, and listen for the ways that God may be speaking to you, wooing you, luring you, inviting you. Consider how you may want to respond. And finally, if it's helpful to you, you may want to use this time to consider what an expansive practice of worship may look like for you as you leave church today and head back out into the world and your day-to-day life. What might worship look like for you on a Monday morning or a Thursday evening or a Saturday afternoon? How might you intentionally lean into love that looks like justice in public and feels like tenderness in private? So I'll leave you with those invitations. And at this point, I'd like to invite the worship team back up to the stage. And as they get set up, I'm going to close us in prayer. This prayer comes from theologian, Christian mystic, educator, and civil rights leader Howard Thurman. It may be one that you've heard before. God, open unto us light for our darkness. Open unto us courage for our fear. Open unto us hope for our despair. Open unto us peace for our turmoil. Open unto us joy for our sorrow. Open unto us strength for our weakness. Open unto us wisdom for our confusion. Open unto us forgiveness for our sins. Open unto us love for our hates. Open unto us thyself for ourselves. Lord, Lord, open unto us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.